Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Striketh, and today we're going to take a look at WildStar. Or, more specifically, my first impressions of WildStar after playing the most recent beta build. Now, if you don't know what WildStar is, then you've probably been living in a hole. Lots of people are all aboard the hype train for the game right now, and there's been all kinds of buzz across the old interwebs. WildStar is the newest MMO on the block, and many of the developers used to work on World of Warcraft. Many fans of WoW are excited over this and are absolutely gushing over the game. Me, not so much. Let me tell you why. When you initially jump into the game, you're met with a pretty decent character creator. It's not amazing by any means, but it does give you more options than many MMOs, and you can definitely make some interesting looking characters. There's two different factions to choose from, and these are the Exiles and the Dominion. The Exiles are kind of your standard rebel faction, while the Dominion is basically an empire that's out to crush the dirty rebels. So that's the setup. After creating your character, you get a cutscene which introduces you to your faction a bit, and this varies depending on which of the two factions you chose. And then you find yourself in the starter area. During the beta, going through the starter area was mandatory, but in the final release, you should be able to skip it. Now that the introductory is over, you're given some quests and it's off to your standard questing MMOs. There's honestly nothing unique or interesting about the questing in WildStar. I will give them props on the writing, as they don't seem to take the story too seriously and place a fair number of jokes throughout, which admittedly made me chuckle a few times. Aside from that, it's questing 101, and just as you know and love or hate from every other MMO. Kill this, fetch that, gather this. Combat takes a little getting used to, but the basic gist of it is that you use certain skills to build up points, which you can then consume with more powerful skills. In the beginning of the game, you only have one skill bar, which you'll have more than halfway filled up by level 7, so you need to think about how you combo things. Also, each class has an ability mapped to the R key by default, which is basically an ultimate. These skills give you some sort of boost, usually generating the points you need to utilize certain abilities at a constant rate as long as they last. With combat in the game, you're basically combining traditional casting bar abilities with a more action-oriented movement system. The game encourages you to move and offers the ability for any class to dash forward or backward with a double tap on the appropriate movement keys by default. You'll be fighting groups of enemies fairly early on, so it's to your advantage not to remain stationary while they're casting their abilities. You can plainly see where an ability is being used by a red indicator on the ground, so you'll want to move out of it. There's also no auto attack in this game, which I personally think is both good and bad. Since there's no auto attack, it promotes higher levels of movement and involvement with your character during combat, but at the same time it can also be annoying when a monster only has a small percentage of life left. Since you can't auto attack, you have to use one of your abilities, which usually has a charge up time before it goes off. One thing that does worry me though is that I created two different character classes during the beta, and both of them played almost exactly the same. They both began with an AoE ability, which led into an ability that comboed with the points generated from the initial ability, and a stun as the third ability. There's not much diversity in the class abilities so far from what I'm seeing, and that, in itself, can make the game dull when you're doing the same things as everyone else. The graphics of the game are definitely nice though. It's by no means an ugly game, though as with any MMO, the texture resolution isn't the highest. It has a good amount of game options in the menu, which should allow the majority of players to find a good setting for their PCs. WildStar has kind of a cartoony look like World of Warcraft does, except it's a bit more of a modern aesthetic. While I've never been a fan of WoW's graphic style, I do actually like WildStar's. You can also zoom incredibly far out too, which gives you a nice view of the surrounding landscape. I'm also quite fond of what I've heard of the music so far. The soundtrack is actually quite good in places, and it feels like they didn't cut any corners in that regard. Usually I listen to my own music when I'm playing MMOs, but I actually turn off my music player and listen to the in-game music in WildStar instead for the majority of my time with the game. That's a good sign to me. My initial impression of the game isn't all negative by any means. I think that's a solid MMO so far, and there's definitely some good aspects about it. With that being said, I'm just not really excited for the game. Like most other MMOs, it plays safe and it does very little to differentiate itself from the MMOs that came before. I found myself getting bored with the game after about 2 hours, and while I was able to come back and play some more on a few occasions, it just didn't hold my attention. Also, while there is some voice acting in the game, most of the dialogue isn't voiced at all. While Elder Scrolls Online has a plethora of issues right now, I feel really spoiled by the voice NPCs in that game, and it's hard for me to go back to another MMO that doesn't have much or any voice acting in places. All of the cutscenes are fully voiced, at least. I left the game feeling very underwhelmed, but I'm sure there's an audience for the game. If you're not looking for an MMO that does anything truly groundbreaking in the genre, but is overall solid, then I recommend checking it out the next time they have a beta weekend and giving it a whirl. You can usually figure out whether you love or hate a game within the first few hours of playing it, so don't just take my word for it, try it yourself. Anyway, I'll wrap this up here. If you played WildStar, let me know in the comment section below what you think about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, thanks for watching. This is Striketh, checking out.